everybody. Thank you for tuning into today's discussion, where we'll explore the importance of collaboration within a child's care team. We'll also discuss the process of adapting school services to fit rare and complex kids. My name is Shannon Bennett. I'm a rare disease parent, advocate, and member of the Rare Disease Network. Much of what I've learned has been through trial and error, and this area of collaboration and care is no different. Today, I'm joined with Stacie Voskuil. She's the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services at Cedar Springs Public Schools. Stacie, thank you for being with us today and for being willing to have this dialogue with me about the importance of collaboration within a care team and how school services sort of fit into that equation. Before we get started, would you mind sharing just a little bit about your background, what your main role is, and maybe what led you there?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today, Shannon. So as you've stated, I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services for Cedar Springs Public Schools. I've been here for about 6 years, but I'm in special education well over 20 years. My journey in special education started as a substitute paraprofessional at the Ottawa Area Center, which is a center-based program for students with severe disabilities. On my very first day of subbing there, while my major was something else, my first day I decided that I needed to be a principal of a center-based school because those kids were the most loved kids, but some of the least educated kids, and I felt like they deserved more. And so I took that upon myself over 20 years ago as a parapro. Between that time, I have been a parapro, I have been a teacher, I've been a behavior specialist, I have been a teacher consultant, I have been a supervisor, and now assistant superintendent. And then along that journey, we were also foster parents and adoptive parents. So I have a lot of experience, and from anywhere from rural districts and suburban districts like Cedar Springs Public Schools, all the way to inner city school districts like Battle Creek Public Schools. So I have a varied background of history, from settings to circumstances to center-based to local education agencies. So I feel very, very fortunate that I've been able to have a career that with such a varied amount of experiences.
Wow, that's great. No wonder you're so good at what you do. What would you say is your favorite part of your job?
So this was probably the hardest question that I pondered as you sent the questions a little bit ahead of time. So there's so many great parts of my job, and every day I think I would name a different part of my job that was my favorite. When I look at my bulk of my work in special education, my favorite part is the staff creativity when it comes to options for kids. It's so inspiring when people come in my door and say, I have an idea. I say, great, and this, and this, and this, and it webs out into so many great things for kids. And it's having that trusting relationship between myself and my staff to know that the limit is the moon. We can do whatever we possibly can to help kids' quality of life to improve. So it's watching those sparks in staff and building those creative solutions for students. I think that's my favorite part of my job right now.
That's great. What are the special educational services that a child's school district is required to provide, and how do rare and complex kids fit into that?
That is a great question. So per IDA and Michigan Administrative Rules of Special Education, we are required to provide a continuum of services for students. Some of our smaller school districts, especially here in Kent County, their continuum of services might be through regional programs or through the Kent ISD. Cedar Springs is more of a moderate sized school district. So we have a lot of services here. We have a lot of services from speech and language pathology to physical therapy, resource room programming, ASD programming. And then if the needs are too complex and we feel like students would be better served in a different setting, we have options to access excuse me, regional programs throughout Kent County and our Kent ISD center-based programs, which are more suitable for students with severe emotional impairments, or students with severe cognitive impairments, or students with multiple impairments. So we have that full continuum of services, and that is required for every school district in Michigan.
Okay. Well, they say hindsight's 20/20, and that's something I think about quite often. I'm always thinking and wondering, what could I have done better or different in this situation? And I think a lot of parents likely feel that way. That said, what kinds of things can parents do to prepare before a child becomes of school age if they know that special education is likely the future of their child?
Yes. So I think the three most really critical things are read to your student, read to your child, read to them every single day, play with your child, and have socialization with other children. Because if your first blush with your child might have some differences, comes in kindergarten or first grade, that is a really shocking thing to a parent. But if you start having more socialization with your students or with your children, with other children, you start recognizing patterns of behavior that might be a little atypical. So it's play, it's socialization, it's read to your children. And then if you have any questions, reach out to your local education agency, reach out to your local school district, because there is someone there that is willing to talk with you, I guarantee it. And we would much rather be in front of information for you rather than you're hearing it from your next door neighbor, Linda, or whatever, because that information might not be completely accurate. And then you come in with some predisposed notions about how things should go for your student that may not be legal or may not be research-based or may not be evidence-based. So I would encourage you to reach out to your local school district if you start thinking that there might be some concerns for your student, or if you just have questions. Schools are here to help. So play, socialization, read, and reach out to that school district.
That's great advice. Thank you. Now, I know that every child is unique and no two IEPs will look the same, but in a more broad sense, what does the typical IEP meeting look like?
Yeah, so it's a group of individuals with a vested interest in your child. So it starts with yourself. You are such a valuable member of that team. You are the expert on your own child. And then you start adding in the special education teacher, the general education teacher, a district representative that can say, this is why things happen, or this is our curriculum, or this is our content standards. And then you have an evaluation representative. So if your child went through a cognitive impairment evaluation, a psychologist might be there. If your child went through an emotional impairment evaluation, a school social worker might be there, or speech and language pathologist. So the IEP, typically IEPs are an hour or more. So you come into a school, you sit around a table, it feels pretty intimidating at first until you build that trusted relationship with your service providers. And then during the IEP process, it starts by talking about the strengths of the student and then the needs of the student. Any parent concerns about the student. So that is the very appropriate time to say, I'm concerned. I'm concerned with my child building friendships, or I'm concerned that they're not able to say the R sound, or whatever that concern is. Get it out on the table at that time. We talk about current functioning skills, their present level of academic functioning performance. So you might hear the term PLAF, and that is just an acronym for present level academic functional performance. So we talk about that current level of the student. From there, we start developing goals and objectives to help meet the disability-related needs of the student. And then we talk about services and programming. We talk about pull in and push out, and we talk about trying to keep that student with their general education peers as much as possible. Because we know that the real world, there is no special education wire. Your child has to be able to integrate and socialize with students with and without disabilities. So we want to push in and be in with that general education setting as much as possible. And all these things are talked about at that IEP. Typically, IEPs follow a form process, but there's also some whiteboard IEPs that really facilitate some two-way communication. And then there's also PowerPoint IEPs where the student helps develop some of their strengths and needs in that PowerPoint. So it can be done virtually, it can be done via phone, it can be done in person. That is really the preference of the parent. So IEP team meetings are what the school is committing to give to the student. So it's a very, very important meeting.
Definitely. Stacie, I have to say, by the time Kenzie was school age, I'd heard countless horror stories about special education and IEPs. I was terrified for her to start school, to be honest with you, for several reasons. One, I didn't know what that would look like for her. No one really did. Secondly, I had this preconceived idea that IEPs were to be dreaded, feared even. And I tell people this all the time, the fear of the unknown is the scariest part of this whole journey, right? So not knowing what to expect from this big, scary meeting is a lot on a parent's shoulders. I am happy to report, however, that I couldn't have been more wrong. IEPs don't have to be scary, even when at the center of said IEP is a child with a condition that no one's ever heard of before. Do you feel like this is often the case for families who have children receiving special education services? And how do you encourage families that are maybe walking into their first IEP meeting terrified?
Oh my goodness, I see that fear all the time. I felt that fear as a parent of a student with an IEP, even in his high school career, going to those meetings when it's my staff. I'm their boss, and I was still going into those meetings nervous. And is he doing as well as I hope he's doing? Is he doing as well as I'm seeing he's doing? What concerns might be thrown at me that I'm not familiar with, and I'm going to be just so caught off guard. So yeah, I see a lot of fear. I see a lot of anger. I see a lot of anxiety. I see the full range of emotions. Sometimes there's celebration meetings because the student no longer qualifies, which means their disability related needs don't need an IEP to address them. So there's the full range and spectrum of emotions when it comes to IEPs. What I remind families when I see those emotions is that we're all on the same team. We have our eye on the ball, and the ball is the kid. And that is the most crucial point. It is not about how I feel about this parent or how this parent blasts the school on social media. It's about the kid. We all want the kid to grow and are working hard to support them. I would encourage parents to give the school the benefit of the doubt. Every educator I know, and I've been in this game for close to 25 years, became an educator because they love kids and they want to see the quality of life for students increase and improve. Every educator that works here at Cedar Springs Public Schools works to the best of their ability, and they work very, very hard. So give that school the benefit of the doubt. And if you're super nervous, start building a bridge and relationship with your students, either gen ed teacher or resource room teacher or special education provider, because just building that relationship and that bridge, you're going to have someone on your side in that IEP meeting. We're all in it for the kid, but if you feel like maybe you have some disconnection with the school, try forging that relationship, because there's someone you're going to be able to have some common ground with, because we all want the same thing.
I'm lucky enough that in Cedar Springs, I felt like when we came into her first IEP meeting, I was terrified, but it was maybe within 5 minutes of being there, I felt like, oh my gosh, I felt like I was at home, like these people get it. And yeah, I have this team of support that I can lean on now that can help me. It was a really good feeling. But in my own experience, I found that in the beginning of our educational journey, things were a little bit disconnected. ABA therapy was separate from school services. Goals were a little bit disjointed, separated, but some overlapped. For lack of a better word, it was a little bit messy. And at the time, I thought that was just normal. It's just how this thing goes. But over time, something beautiful and organic kind of happened. Kenzie's school team started working directly with her ABA team, and together we created cohesive, streamlined goals together, and now everyone works together. And once a month, we have a team meeting where her ABA team, her school team, everybody comes together and talks about where we are with goals, where we need to go, things we can improve. But I will say at the center of that is always Kenzie's strength. And that's what I need to hear, is all of these things that she's doing wonderful, because most of my life with Kenzie has been spent hearing what's wrong on this medical test and what's wrong here. And it's just such a breath of fresh air to hear what's right. What are we doing right? So, oh my gosh, what a powerful team we've developed over time. And Kenzie's IEP meetings are honestly some of the most positive and inspiring meetings that I've ever experienced. Now, I do recognize that her situation is a little bit different because she's a homebound student. But is it unusual for this sort of collaboration to take place? And if so, why do you think that's the case?
So not at all. This collaboration is what we desperately want as a school team. We want to be part of what's happening at home. We want to be a part of what's happening in outside agency services, because it does take a village. And we see students for 6.5 hours a day. That is not the majority of their time. So we want to work together. We want a full and engaged team. We want what's best for each student, which does mean collaborating with some of these outside agencies. And again, it really boils down to trust and relationships in that open door. Some parents don't want outside agencies to talk with the school, and that's okay too. That's their prerogative, but it definitely limits what we're able to complete for these students and the full picture. We want to paint a full picture of what the students need and really be able to drill down on what is the greatest need and how do we get there and how do we scaffold up to make that student as successful and the highest quality of life possible. The teachers want to be engaged. They want to have that collaborative relationship. The staff want it. It boils down to all about relationships and trust.
Yeah, definitely. I had mentioned that Kenzie's a homebound student. For those that are unfamiliar, could you talk a little bit about what homebound education looks like for some special education students like my daughter?
Yeah, so oftentimes when we talk about homebound, there's two things that really get mixed up. Some people say homebound and home-based are interchangeable. They are not. Homebound is a physician, a DO, has said that the student must be confined to the home during school hours, and it's for 5 or more days. So you have to have that qualifying criteria from a doctor or physician before we can even open the door for homebound services. Home base is more for discipline services, but it can feel a lot the same, but they're 2 different lanes. Homebound is for students with those types of disabilities that they can't leave the home. Sometimes it's acute and short term. Sometimes it is a longer term situation as their health is trying to get under control. Or during this COVID, with people with compromised immune systems, we've seen an increase in homebound services because students, their immune systems can't take the risk of COVID. So what does the homebound look like? It's truly the I in IEP. It is truly individualized. We have the lowest bar standards that we have to do per Michigan Administrative Rules of Special Education, but it's not enough. You need to absolutely take a look at the kid and how can we get that kid to progress in their goals and objectives and progress in the general education curriculum. So it's whatever that takes. It could look like 3 hours for one student. It could look like 5 days a week for another student. So it depends on each student and their stamina and their health obstacles. Because if their stamina is only 20 minutes at a time, we might do 5 days a week at 20 minutes at a time because that's all their stamina can take. Or we might do an AM PM. It's really about the I in IEP. It's the individualized approach for homebound services as we approach every student with every service and every program.
So what happens if a child has needs that are too complex for the district to accommodate, but is not homebound? Is this where center-based programs come into play, and how does that work?
Yeah, center-based programming is my love language. I love center-based programming. And like I said earlier, I was a parapro, I was a teacher at Centerbased, I was the principal at Centerbased for a short period. I love the complex issues. That said, not all assistant superintendents or directors of special education have that awareness or that willingness because it's scary. It's scary not to be the expert in the room. And a lot of these things, like rare diseases, like Kenzie's disease, none of us are the experts about. But we are experts in how to where are her baselines and how do we educate her to make the next step up and the next step up and the next step up. So we have that continuum of services. Oftentimes, the first thing we think about is how do we keep this child in the least restrictive environment? How do we keep the student so that they can have access to their general education peers? So we talk about least restrictive environment, if there's any chance that we can get the student in and have access to their general education peers. If that's not feasible, either due to medical concerns, health concerns, behavioral concerns, then we can look at other options, more restrictive options, which are like the regional programs, which all of our regional programs are located in school districts. So they do have access to their general education peers, but it doesn't come to the level of center-based. And center-based is a segregated facility, and that's all counties. There's a segregated facility, and it's where the students with the highest needs are served because their staff-to-student ratio is higher. They may have full-time nursing staff. Depending on those needs, depends on where they fit in the curriculum. But oftentimes, especially as the medical profession has come to more extreme measures, we are dealing more and more and more with students with really high needs. So we are stepping out of our comfort zone to try to meet the needs of these students in the least restrictive environment.
Okay. You had mentioned that sometimes it can be challenging to work with kids that have rare conditions like Kenzie. What are some of the challenges and rewards that you experience when working with rare and complex kids with conditions that maybe you've not heard of before?
Oh my goodness, the rewards are the student and the family, and the Bennett family are a true case in point. I mean, Kenzie is just a joy. And being able to, I don't see her every day. I only participate in the IEPs every so often. Yeah. But I have staff members who come in and share little videos or share little Kenzie stories. And that is so heartwarming because we are doing right by her and it feels fantastic. And it's relationships with families, knowing that we are your partner. We are your partner through this, and we're not going to let you down, and we're hoping you're not going to let us down. It's an inspiring thing to see these people navigate and keep such hope. So, and that's from the student to the family, because these are oftentimes just brand new. There's no guidebook to these things. And so that trust, that hope, working in the center-based programming, it was some of the best life lessons for me, because the students with some of the most severe disabilities would come in with all the baggage that they have carrying every day of their life and are some of the happiest people I know. And so it's such a great lesson to work with some of these rare diseases. You know, working at the center-based programming, I love that program and I love those students, but I'm also a risk taker. So I'm okay not being the expert in the room. And that's hard to swallow sometimes because parents are looking for school to be experts. Schools are hoping to be the experts. And when you're not, it is a vulnerable place to be. So I think the best rewards are seeing those accomplishments of the student and family and hearing those little stories about the connections that are being made and all the hopes and dreams of the future and how we're getting closer and closer to getting them there.
You talk about not being the expert in the room, being a vulnerable place to be. I want to unpack that a little bit. How do you overcome that challenge of being faced with conditions that you've not heard before?
Yeah, so as I get more steeped in my career, my roots are deeper and deeper, it's much, much more easy. When I was a young, fresh administrator, I felt like I always had to have all the answers. And so it's you have to build your own confidence as an administrator, as a teacher, as a parent, recognizing that it's okay for me to have some answers and not all answers. You have to continue to build that network of supports so that you can say, I don't know, but you know what, I'm going to dig in and try to find that answer for you. It's a hard thing not having the answers, because especially assistant superintendent, people look to me to have all the answers.
Yeah,
I don't have all the answers. I'm the very first one to say I don't have all the answers, but I can find someone who does. And that's the tenacity of an administrator that needs to keep coming forward and saying, I have the network, I can do the research, or my staff can do the research. We might not have the answers today, but we might get them tomorrow. So that vulnerability, it comes with time. That confidence comes with time,
yep.
And the willingness to be vulnerable in the meetings. That comes with time and the trust of the teams as well. Because I know all my people know I don't have all the answers. They're going to try to come to me with some questions and answers, but they also know I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to make something up. I'm going to be honest. If I don't know, I'm going to say it, but I'm going to dig in and help them find the answers.
That's great. And what other ways, maybe we haven't covered yet, do you regularly adapt education to fit kids with complex needs?
So we adapt everything all the time for almost everybody. There is a system, and probably most people that are watching this have already heard of MTSS, or multi-tiered system of supports. So for every student in the district, there are 3 tiers of support. Tier 1 is what everybody gets. It's that gen ed curriculum. It's a gen ed teacher. Everybody gets that tier 1 support. And then there's some students who need a little extra support. And that's when you get into some counselor support or some behavior plans. And then that tier 3 is the more individualized support. And tier 3 and beyond is where the IEPs fit in. So we adapt through our MTSS system, we adapt through our IEPs, we have close collaboration with the Ken ISD, and I think most school districts have close collaborations with their ISD counterparts because that's where a lot of the experts live. They have access to the entire county, so our one issue might be 5 issues across the county that they've already helped to deal with and already have the answers. I have close networks across Michigan. There is a students of low incidence population. It's a committee of administrators of special education that if you have low incidence population, those kids that there's only a small fraction of that type of a student in the county or in the state, there's that network of support. We can call in any experts at any point, and as you get more and more in your career, you get a longer list of experts. I think the biggest piece to adapting education is to listening to the needs of the student and the family, and then trying to be as creative as possible and having the flexibility and giving the flexibility to your staff to be as creative as possible. Now, there are certainly some pieces that will confine us. The administrative rules of special education, IDEA, there are certain things that compliance-wise we can and can't do, but a creative school team will try to work to make inroads to make things happen for students, even if they are the most complex students we've ever dealt with in our life. They have needs that we can certainly meet.
I love that. Having one of those super complex kids myself, I love that. Now you talked about, as an educator, as an administrator, you've become more seasoned over time and your confidence comes with experience. And it's really no different as a parent of a kid with a rare condition. In the beginning, I didn't know my voice. I didn't know how to advocate. I just sort of was like cattle, following the following the herd on what they were telling me to do. And as Kenzie's grown up and we've sort of had all these different experiences, now I have a voice, quite a loud one at times. But what are some ways that that you would suggest parents or caregivers can advocate for the individual and educational needs of their child, maybe for those parents that just haven't quite found their voice yet?
Yeah. My biggest piece of advice is build a bridge. Start building a bridge. Figure out that one person that you can have some connection with on that IEP team. It doesn't have to be the gen ed teacher. It doesn't have to be the special education provider. It can be the psych. It could be the OT. It could be the speech and language pathologist. Find a connection and build that bridge so you can start a conversation. Listen and trust that those educational experts, because there is nothing that will cause a bigger divide as parents who come in and are using the educational staff as a punching bag. And I've seen this regularly over the last 20 years because there's a grieving process, and sometimes parents are stuck in the anger phase of, this is not the child that I thought I had, and they want to blame someone. And the easiest target is that kindergarten teacher, or that psychologist, or that speech, whoever was the person who delivered the message that your student might have some needs. But that is the first biggest way to build a divide between the two teams. And we all want to be on the same team. So my biggest piece of advice is start a conversation, build that bridge. And once you have that bridge, you can ask all the questions you want with an open mind. I don't know if there's any question you could ask, Shannon, to any of our IEP team members that would offend them at this time, because they know you. They know we're on the same team. Recognize that school staff have more obstacles than ever. Their heart is still in it for kids, and they are truly doing their best. So yes, you might not get a note home that day, or there might be something that you've agreed upon that the teacher might have dropped the ball on. Don't blast that teacher. Don't blast that teacher on social media. Give that teacher some grace, just like you would want for yourself.
Right.
Teaching is one of the hardest professions, especially right now with the media and social media. So give some grace to your educational providers, build that bridge, build a relationship, thank and encourage your school team because they are putting in more hours than you can even imagine. You as a parent may treat that school staff really, really well, but very often we're not treated well. We're often targets of the media, the legislature, we're parents punching bags. For people that dedicated their lives to educating kids, it's hard to keep your head up with all those factors coming at us. Yeah. But be positive and supportive of your school team, and they will do everything they possibly can for you and your kid.
I love that. Stacie, this was a truly meaningful conversation, and I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day today to be a part of our Rare Disease Day event.
Yeah, I really appreciate the time as well.